what caused the catastrophic flood in Nepal and Tibet, and how does a glacier collapse? A glacial collapse, registering as a magnitude 5.2 seismic event, occurred near the border on Wednesday morning. Hundreds of people have died in catastrophic flash floods in Nepal. Here's what we know so far about what caused the disaster. On Wednesday morning local time, a landslide of ice and rock resulted in a torrent of mud, water and debris bursting the banks of the Trishuli River, also known as the Bodakoshi, which runs between China and Nepal. Homes, roads, bridges and power plants were swept away. Experts at the Kathmandu-based International Center for Integrated Mountain Development said water levels on the Trishuli River rose by as much as 9 meters in half an hour. The Lende Kola River, a tributary of the Trishuli, was most affected, they said. Nepal's Foreign Minister Shishir Khanal told the country's parliament on Wednesday that initial reports suggested the floods could have been caused by an earthquake in the area that triggered a landslide. However, the U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, subsequently said that a glacial collapse was responsible for the seismic event and for the flooding itself. The USGS noted that the glacial collapse had registered as a magnitude 5.2 seismic event, occurring near the border between Nepal and China at 8:37 a.m. local time on Wednesday. According to Daniel Sugar, a geomorphologist and associate professor at the University of Calgary in Canada, initial satellite analysis showed a 0.2 SQKM chunk of ice had collapsed about 1.2 kilometers vertically. What I can see in satellite imagery from Planet Labs, the lower part of a glacier broke off at about 5,200 meters and crashed onto the valley floor about 1,200 meters below, he said, before and after images showing the glacier's collapse. The imagery seemed to show that a large amount of snow had melted in the 24 hours prior to the disaster, he said. Some of the glaciers in the valley were covered in snow yesterday, and today they are mostly bare ice. So in other words, and I haven't seen any weather station data yet, it was probably warm. Sugar said construction could also be a factor. Prof. Andrew McIntosh, a glaciologist at Monash University in Melbourne, said it was unclear whether the collapse was isolated to the glacier or was the whole mountainside collapsing that included part of the glacier. When a glacier of that scale collapses, it generates a lot of water, and then there's a cascading sequence of events where the water and the sediment combine and bulks up and creates the flood. These sorts of large glacier collapses are really shocking, McIntosh said. It's hard as a glaciologist not be alarmed by these events that seem different to what we've observed previously. However, he said there had been so few of these documented that we're not really able to make very clear statements about the specific relationship between glacier collapse and climate change yet. Scientists do, however, have very high confidence in the relationship between glacier retreat and climate change. We also know that mountain permafrost is degrading under a warming climate, McIntosh added. He described permafrost, ground that is frozen year-round, as being akin to a glue that holds the rock and sometimes adjacent glaciers together on very steep slopes. The Himalayas, spanning Nepal, India, China, Bhutan, and Pakistan, are warming twice as fast as the global average, putting the region at increased risk of avalanches, landslides, and floods. The UN said in 2023 that Nepal's mountains had lost close to 1/3 of their ice in just over 30 years due to global heating. An assessment published that year found that the Hindu Kush Himalayan glaciers had disappeared 65% faster between 2011 and 2020 than in the previous decade. In 2021, a Himalayan glacier broke off and caused flash flooding in the Indian state of Uttarakhand, leaving 200 people dead or missing. Subsequent research suggested that a 27 meters cubic meter avalanche of rock and glacier ice had transformed into an extraordinarily large and mobile debris flow. Though not thought to be a cause of the August 2026 event, mountain areas are also at risk of glacial lake outburst floods. Glacial lakes form behind natural dams as a result of glacier melt and can cause catastrophic outburst floods if their natural dam walls are breached. Adrian McCallum, a glaciologist, polar engineer and associate professor at the University of the Sunshine Coast in Australia, said, "With a warming climate, glaciers recede, ice becomes water, that water gets trapped." More than 12,000 deaths have already been attributed to such floods globally. According to the UN, Nepal has more than 2,000 glacial lakes, of which 21 are considered potentially dangerous. With Reuters and Associated Press. 9/21. Tsunami from the sky. Floods leave trail of devastation in Nepal and Tibet. The latest. Explore more on these topics.